The sound hit her before the fear. A sharp scrape on old stone, wet breath from the dark, and two pale eyes climbing up through a throat of moss. Emily leaned forward without thinking. A lynx filled the mouth of the ruined well, ears tipped black like soaked matches. It didn't snarl. It looked past her shoulder, as if the answer it wanted was somewhere in the trees. "Back away, wait for help," the sensible voice said. Emily planted a palm on the cold rim and steadied her breath. A flat stone jammed the animal's shoulder. The rock held. The lynx's chest rose quick and tight, not angry, just spent. She told herself out loud to be careful. She called Jack. The phone rang while she braced both hands and pushed. Pebbles hissed. The stone shifted half an inch. The lynx moved with a quiet wince. The call rolled to voicemail. Emily hung up and pushed again. She wedged a shoulder under the rock, found a grip with her short nails, and worked the weight outward a breath at a time. Calves shaking, she levered until the block tipped and slapped the dirt. For a beat, nothing happened. Then the lynx pulled free. Emily let her hands hang open. She kept her eyes low, reading its body. Up close, she saw damp fur on the chest in a narrow strip. The animal lifted one paw with care. Not broken, but tender. It angled past with the caution of a creature that has tested every exit. "I'm not touching you," she said to the air. "I only moved the stone." The lynx paused at the gap in the wall and looked down the slope into the trees, ears turning as if tuning a station. Emily heard only small forest sounds, a fly, a leaf rubbing another leaf, a far truck on the highway that never arrived. Grace's shoes scuffed the path. Emily didn't turn. Grace spoke quiet that they should give space. She had nitrile gloves if needed. Emily said Jack wasn't picking up and that she didn't want sirens, only sense. They stepped aside. The animal climbed the last steps and stood on the path like a statue trying to breathe. Its ribs showed. Its tail was short and dark at the tip. Emily whispered that the chest looked wet. Grace squinted and said it looked like milk. The word landed between them. "Mother." Emily felt it like a small electric pulse. The lynx moved on, not toward them, but along the bend toward the lower trees. Every few steps the same story showed in its gait. A guarded paw, a swallow of effort, then steady drive. Emily matched 2 careful paces, then 3. Grace caught her elbow and said not to crowd it. Emily said she only wanted to see what it pointed to. They stopped where the path widened. The lynx reached the edge of shade and raised its head to test the air, mouth open the way a cat drinks scent. Pupils narrowed. It looked through them, not at them, and slipped left into undergrowth. She called Jack again. This time he answered over the noise of his old pickup. She said the lynx was out but hurting, and that it kept checking the trees as if something there mattered more than any of them. Jack said he was 5 minutes out. "Do nothing brave," he said. "Do everything slow." They waited by the ruin and watched the break in the ferns. Grace texted Noah, the ranger she knew from volunteer days. He would tell them to keep distance and not feed anything, she said. Emily nodded and kept her eyes on the green seam the lynx had opened. Jack arrived. He crossed to them, took in the scene, and said okay in the voice he saved for flat tires and bad weather. "Where did it go?" he asked. Emily pointed. "Let's not turn a rescue into a chase," he said. They listened. What came next was a sound so thin it almost wasn't one. Not a mew, not a cry, more like air leaving through a reed. The lynx heard it. In the undergrowth its ears pricked, searching left then right. It flowed toward a hollow below the path and paused. Emily felt the sound more than heard it, a hint of smallness and need. Jack took 2 steps downslope and crouched. The animal favored the right foreleg more on the incline. Grace murmured that a rock had likely bruised the joint and that it would heal if left alone. Grace didn't argue. She only watched. Another small sound rose from the hollow, then stopped. It came not from where the lynx stared but off to the side, deeper in the bracken. The animal turned sharply. It glanced back once, not asking, more like checking the world behind had not moved. Then it went into the green, body low, shoulder brushing tall stems, silent as a shadow ignoring the sun. Jack returned to the path. He didn't want to push down there until Noah arrived. She looked again at the damp line on the chest and thought of the word Grace had said. "Milk." Noah called. Grace answered, then gave the phone to Jack. He said he was on the road and that they needed to stay hands-off. Jack repeated the same words back. Emily put her phone away and stepped to the edge, just enough to see a lane in the undergrowth brushed open by a body that knew where it was going. The lynx reappeared on a flat rock at the base of a maple, testing it with one paw and settling like a lookout. Emily followed its gaze and saw only more green, more shadow, more waiting. She told the others she would stay until dark if she had to. Grace passed water from her pack. The sound came again, thin but shaped now, like a syllable trying to find a mouth. The lynx stood at once and flowed toward the lower ground. Emily reached for Jack's wrist the way she had as a kid crossing an icy street. He squeezed back once. The animal vanished. The bracken shivered toward a shallow cut in the earth Emily hadn't noticed. From there came a final sound, clearer, like a small cough. The lynx's ears flashed, then disappeared. The hair rose on Emily's arms. She didn't know if the sound meant one or many or danger or just being. She only knew it was the first true thing all morning. She held on to it the way a person holds a promise. She looked at Jack. He read the same message in her face. Grace said that if they were young, they would need space and water and time. She picked up the bandana she had dropped and told herself out loud she had only moved a stone. The rest would be about reading signs and not crossing lines. She looked at the dead mouth of the well and at the living green below. Between those two places a path had already begun. They waited for Noah. The last thing Emily heard before an engine touched the clearing was a faint, unmistakable breath from the hollow. Not a cry, not yet. The lynx turned its head. Emily turned hers the same way. Whatever came next would start down there. Noah pulled his truck into the clearing with a crunch of gravel. He stepped out slow, radio clipped to his vest, eyes steady. He asked if anyone had touched the animal. Emily shook her head. She said she only moved a stone. Jack added that the lynx had left toward the lower ground and hadn't come back. Grace mentioned the sound they had all heard. Noah wrote it in a small notepad and told them the first rule was distance. No feeding, no chasing, no heroics. Emily held back her urge to argue. Noah's calm weight made it clear. He was not here to play the villain. He wanted people safe. He promised to file a report and check back within a day. If the lynx lingered near houses, state policy could force a capture. The word capture hung in the air. Grace muttered that it might only need space. Noah didn't answer. He tapped his notepad, then walked the ruin's edge, eyes tracking prints on soft earth. He confirmed what they already knew. The lynx had dragged a paw. By afternoon, the three of them sat in Grace's kitchen with coffee mugs. The air smelled like pine cleaner. Emily scrolled her phone. Already 2 posts in the neighborhood group mentioned a wildcat near the trails. Parents warned each other. Someone joked about keeping their kids on leashes. Someone else asked if it was rabid. Jack cursed under his breath. He hated how fast fear spread. They decided to walk the lower paths before dusk to read the ground themselves. Grace carried a small first aid kit. Emily had her phone ready for pictures. Jack led with a flashlight, though the sun was still high. The path narrowed between birch trunks. In the mud under a log they found it. A leather collar torn through at the buckle. A faint smell of wet dog clung to it. Jack turned it over. No tag, just frayed leather and 1 brass ring. Emily's gut twisted. Grace suggested a stray had crossed paths out here. Jack stuffed it in his pack without speaking. A few yards ahead, Emily crouched. The dirt held prints. The wide pad of the lynx, pressed deep, and smaller marks like dimples alongside. She brushed the surface with her finger. Too small for raccoon, too wide for squirrel. Grace said softly they looked like kitten tracks. Emily felt her chest squeeze. She wanted to believe. She took photos. They reached a hollow where water had pooled. Someone had left an old plastic bowl years ago, cracked on the rim. The mud around it was wet with palm marks. Jack bent and touched the edge. It smelled like the forest and something else, animal saliva, recent. Emily set her phone to record video, capturing the prints in fading light. They lingered longer than they should have. The woods shifted with evening. A thrush went silent. Grace said they should head back before dark. Emily hesitated, eyes locked on the trail bending further down. Jack tugged her sleeve. They left the bowl where it was. At home that night, Emily couldn't let it rest. She set her phone by the window, propped to catch the backyard where the ruins path opened. She downloaded a motion app. Jack told her not to obsess. She said she just wanted proof. He said proof cuts both ways. Near midnight, her phone buzzed. The screen showed the yard pale in infrared. Movement at the edge, a shape low and deliberate. The lynx stepped into frame, ribs clear in the ghost light. Its chest fur was dark and damp, hanging heavy as it moved. It stopped by the fence, lifted its head, and for a moment looked straight at the lens. Its mouth opened slightly, and Emily swore she saw a string of moisture on the fur, like milk clinging. The animal blinked, then turned and was gone. Emily replayed the clip over and over. Each time her throat tightened. Grace texted when she saw it. "You need to send that to Noah." Emily didn't answer. She saved the file twice. The next morning word had spread. At the store, Emily heard whispers. Parents warning each other not to let kids bike alone. A man at the counter said he'd seen tracks by his shed. Another woman claimed she heard a cry at dawn. Jack pulled Emily aside, told her to ignore the noise. Fear never shrinks once it gets a story. She nodded but couldn't shake the clip in her mind. That evening, Noah posted an update to the neighborhood feed. He wrote that if any new sightings occurred near homes, he would recommend a capture for relocation. He added a line, "Wild animals are not pets, and human safety comes first." Comments lit up. Some thanked him. Others demanded faster action. A few asked what relocation really meant. Emily read them in silence. She thought about the damp line on the lynx's chest, about the tiny prints in the mud, about the hollow sound that had risen from the green. She closed her phone and sat on the porch until the sun slipped behind the trees. When she finally went inside, the motion app blinked again. She pressed play. This time it was only wind moving a branch, but her chest still thudded like it knew the next true sign was close. Emily carried the jug of water with both hands, the plastic cool against her palms. She set it by the ruin where the stone rim broke into shadow. Jack shook his head the whole time. He told her leaving anything was crossing a line. She said it wasn't food, it was just water. He asked why she tied a strip of cloth to the handle. She didn't answer. The cloth was from a worn shirt that smelled like her laundry, her house, her hands. She wanted the lynx to find comfort in something that wasn't a fence or a trash can. Grace didn't argue. She only adjusted the cloth so it wouldn't blow away. She said she would keep watch that night. Jack muttered that they weren't park staff and they didn't know the rules. Grace told him rules weren't made for every moment. Sometimes people had to choose the smaller risk. They stayed until dusk. The woods quieted too early, birds clipping their songs in half. Emily kept scanning the trail, but the lynx didn't show. Jack insisted they leave. Grace promised she'd circle back after dark. At home, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat by the window with her phone. The motion app pinged at 3 in the morning. She hit play. The grainy clip showed the ruin, pale and infrared. A shadow slid into frame. The lynx lowered its head to the jug, muzzle moving. Then it paused, lifted, and sniffed the cloth. Emily leaned close to the screen. The animal pressed its face to the strip, eyes half closed, then pulled back and vanished. Emily let the video run until it ended on stillness. She replayed it twice, then sent it to Grace. Grace answered with a thumbs up and nothing else. At first light, Emily returned. The jug stood lighter by inches. On the stone beside it, a faint smear glistened where the early sun touched. She crouched and brushed a finger. It was sticky white. Her chest tightened. "Milk." She whispered it to herself, not ready to say it louder. Jack arrived minutes later, still half asleep. He looked at the smear and cursed under his breath. He said it meant young ones somewhere. Emily nodded, eyes on the slope beyond the ruin. Grace came soon after, her face pale from the night. She said she heard movement near dawn, but didn't follow. Then it happened. The lynx appeared almost silent, stepping from the brush as if it had been waiting for them to arrive. Its eyes caught Emily's and held. No growl, no flinch. Just a long, steady look that made her forget to breathe. Then, without warning, it turned and moved fast down the slope toward the trees. Emily rose and followed 3 steps before Jack pulled her back. She shook him off and kept eyes on the path. The lynx slipped between stones, its lame paw careful but sure. It reached a narrow pass where 2 rocks pressed together like a gate. There it stopped, lowered its head, and vanished inside. From the hollow came a sound, thin as thread. Not a cry, not a call, more like the smallest hum of life. Emily's throat ached hearing it. Jack went still beside her. Grace covered her mouth. But the entrance was blocked halfway by a slab of stone lodged at an angle. The gap beneath was narrow, barely enough for the lynx to squeeze through. The animal slid inside, but behind it the sound carried, muffled, weak. Jack said no way they could move that without tools. Emily crouched, pressing her palm to the rock. She felt vibration, like a soft tap from within. She pulled her hand back quick. A voice behind startled her. Noah had arrived, his truck still cooling at the edge of the path. He carried 2 straps and a folded cage in his arms. He looked at the slab, then at them. His voice was calm but tight. If the lynx stayed near homes, if it threatened people, protocol was clear. Relocation. He set the gear down. Emily shook her head. She begged him for time. She said this wasn't about danger, it was about family. Noah said family doesn't matter if someone gets hurt. Grace stepped in, telling him they weren't reckless, they just wanted a chance to see what lived under that stone. The lynx reemerged, chest damp again, eyes sharp. It stood between them and the hollow, muscles taut but not attacking. It looked ready to defend, not to run. Noah froze, cage straps still in hand. Emily whispered that they weren't here to take, only to clear a path. Her phone buzzed. Dr. Miller on the line. She turned the screen so they all could hear. His calm voice filled the morning. If a stone blocked access, move it only enough to open space. No loud tools, no fire, no traps. He said if there were young inside, the mother would do the rest. Emily locked eyes with the lynx. She told the vet she understood. Jack said they didn't have levers or winches. Miller replied that even shifting an inch could change everything. He hung up. Grace's phone pinged right then. A neighbor's post in the community feed. Someone claimed they saw 2 small shapes dart near the lower creek the night before. Not 1, but 2. Grace read it aloud. Emily felt her knees weaken. Jack said maybe they had a chance. Noah sighed, rubbed the back of his neck, and lowered the cage. He said he'd give them one morning. After that, the state stepped in. Emily nodded, gripping the cloth still tied to the jug handle. The lynx looked once more at the hollow, then at her. In the space between those 2 glances lived the answer she wasn't ready to speak. They stood in silence. The only sound was the faintest rustle from under the stone, like a breath carried upward through earth. Emily told herself it was enough for now. She would take that sound as proof, even if no one else could hear it. Jack pulled the jack from the bed of his truck and dropped it onto the dirt with a thud. Noah unwound 2 straps and laid them flat like lines on a map. Grace tugged on thick gloves, flexing her fingers. Emily wiped her palms on her jeans. The air around them was cool, still, as if the forest itself held its breath. The slab that blocked the hollow slanted heavy, its weight settled deep in the earth. The lynx sat 10 feet away, tail twitching once, then still. It didn't retreat. It watched every motion with the stillness of something that had chosen to trust or chosen to gamble. Emily couldn't tell which. Jack slid the jack under the edge of the slab. Noah looped one strap around a nearby stump, the other through a crack in the stone. Grace braced her boots on the slope. Emily clicked on her small flashlight, though the sun was high. She wanted to be ready to see inside. Metal groaned as Jack cranked the jack. The slab shifted a fraction, grinding soil. Dust puffed upward. Emily leaned close, heart hammering. A rustle answered from within, faint but clear. She gasped. Grace whispered steady, "Keep going." The stone lifted another inch. Through the gap, Emily saw movement. At first just shadow, then a flicker, pale spots on tawny fur. A paw, tiny, pressed against earth. Her breath caught hard in her throat. She dropped the light beam on it, just for a second. The shape jerked back deeper into the hollow. The lynx moved at once. It surged low, slipped through the widening gap, and disappeared inside. Emily crouched, light fixed on the space. She could hear shuffling, a muffled squeak, then silence. Noah gripped the empty cage in his hands, muscles tense. He could have moved then. Instead, he stood still. Seconds stretched. Then the lynx reemerged, shoulders hunched around something small cradled in her jaws. She stepped clear, eyes locked on Emily. The bundle moved, a faint twitch of life, spots along its flank. Emily felt tears press up without warning. The lynx carried the kitten across the slope into the green shadow of ferns. She laid it gently, then turned back toward the hollow. Jack tightened the jack another notch. The slab rose higher. Another rustle, lighter than the first. Emily knelt, beam cutting into the dark. A second shape shifted, nose pushing forward. The lynx slid back through, body brushing the stone. She reached in with one paw, drew the small form toward her, and gathered it with her mouth. The second kitten, silent except for the sound of its breath. Not a cry, just a faint exhale. Emily tilted the flashlight, steadying the beam. The lynx passed close, so close Emily could see the damp line across her chest again. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, Emily thought she saw thanks, or maybe only warning. Then the lynx disappeared with the second bundle, melting into the green where the first lay hidden. Noah lowered the cage to the ground, his hands unclenched. He muttered that relocation wasn't the answer tonight. Grace exhaled like she'd been holding her lungs shut for hours. Jack turned the crank one last time, then eased it back, letting the slab settle without sealing the gap. He said if there were more, they deserved the chance. Emily leaned near, light steady. The hollow seemed empty now, but just as she pulled back, she caught a faint sound. Not a cry, not even a mewl. Just the whisper of breath, tiny and sure. She looked at Jack. He shook his head, couldn't tell. Grace said softly that sometimes you don't count until the mother shows you. They waited. The lynx returned once more, slipping through like smoke. She reached deep, muscles tight, and for a second Emily thought she might bring nothing. Then a paw, then a lift of fur. Another small body, or maybe the same. Emily blinked, unsure. The lynx moved too quick, carrying it into cover. The ferns closed behind her. The clearing settled. The slab leaned back in place, crooked but passable. The straps lay slack. The Jack stood silent. Noah set the cage back in his truck without a word. Emily stayed crouched until the forest noises returned. The hum of insects, the pulse of leaves. She shut off the flashlight. The others stepped back. She stayed one moment longer, staring at the gap, listening. The lynx did not return. Only the steady hush of the woods filled the air. Emily rose slowly. She felt the weight of what she'd seen, but also what she hadn't. 2, maybe 3. Alive, carried by a mother that hadn't fled. No one spoke on the walk back. The tools clanked, straps dragged, boots scuffed. At the trucks, Noah said he'd write nothing for now. He said he saw no threat tonight. Jack clapped his shoulder once. Grace gave a thin smile. Emily said nothing. She carried only the sound of that breath in her ears, replaying it until it felt like part of her own. She knew answers would never come clean, but the image of a spotted paw pressed to stone would never leave her. The next morning, she woke to a mark on the stone by the ruin, still damp, drying under the sun. The jug she had left stood empty, licked clean, not spilled. And by her porch, in the soft dirt, a print half the size of her palm pressed deep and clear. She touched it with her fingers, heart thudding. She didn't know if it was a goodbye or a promise.